in case.
In case there's some people who,
Yeah, I've set up some chairs here for a watch party just in case.
okay. And do you open at
We open at 10.
10? Okay.
Yeah. Next week, we have a talk on wolves. Our local Colorado Parks and Wildlife guy is going to do it. Good morning. Come on in.
We see you with my sunglasses, but hi.
Hi. Good morning. We have two folks joining us in person, Jim.
Great. So you're at the library right now?
Yeah, we're at the
Okay.
library. Welcome.
Thank you. Got seats in the house here.
Yeah, you have good seats. Am I in your way? Do you want to sit? Am I?
Fine.
Okay.
Fine. A lot of these things on TV, people are walking around in the woods and they think they see Sasquatch.
Yeah, there's a lot of that on TV nowadays.
There is.
It's become a phenomenon.
Not only in
America is infatuated with Bigfoot.
I know my granddaughter is. Oh, let me let some more people in.
Okay.
Oh. Oh, yeah. I've been working on taxes. I just started collect, I haven't started, I just been collecting. I have some things that know. See, they sent me an email and they're not going to 99 now until February 28th. They can get away with that. Well, I got it.
Oops.
Sasquatch, what's your name?
We have a gentleman who just came in who is as tall as Sasquatch, he says.
Well, this guy's the expert. I haven't seen you.
What do you think, Jim? Should we get started?
We can do that. And if people still need to come in once we're growing, that's fine.
One more.
Okay. Just to let everybody know, we are recording this event. We now have, good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy McCarthy. And before we get started with Jim Myers of the Sasquatch Outpost in Bailey, Colorado, I just wanted to let everyone know we're recording. We're going to post it to our YouTube channel. For those folks who couldn't make it today, I know at my house we didn't have internet this morning. So I don't know what's going on with the internet, but it doesn't seem to like hold well there this morning. So Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you. We are
Okay.
very blessed to have you, and I so appreciate you doing this.
You're welcome. And hello to everyone who's watching, whether you're at the library or at your home. And I'm glad we did this virtually because I would not have wanted to drive to West Cliff from Bailey this morning. That would have been a long, slippery drive, I'm sure. So, but this is my favorite topic to talk about. So I was very happy when Kathy contacted me, happy to do this. I've spoken quite a few libraries. Our library here in Bailey. I've spoken at the library in Woodland Park, in let's see, down by Divide. So few libraries over the years, and it's always fun to do that because I get people who are a lot of times who have never heard anyone talk about this topic, um, who are skeptics or believers alike. I have both come to these talks, and some people want to be convinced, and other people want to prove me wrong. So, whatever the case is for any of you, I'm glad you came this morning, and um, I'm going to pause a couple times for questions. If you have a question, you can write it in the chat section, and when I get to the pause, Kathy will let me know if there's a question in there, or if you're actually live with her at the library, you can ask the question out loud. That's fine. But This is a talk I've given a few times. I usually modify it a little bit, but I call it the Sasquatch conundrum, and I'll explain as I go why that is. But a conundrum is a confusing or difficult problem. And Sasquatch is a confusing or difficult problem in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. My wife and I own the Sasquatch Outpost gift shop and the Sasquatch Encounter Discovery Museum in Bailey. If none of you have been to visit us, I hope you will. We're right off of 285, Highway 285. There are signs in town telling you where to get off to get to our store and museum. We're probably the main destination in Bailey today for people coming through Bailey, and we have people coming from around the country and many countries of the world to come visit us. So we have grown greatly over the, let's see, 12 years that we've been in existence. And now that we're here and people know that we're here, we've become a destination, which I'm happy for. And we try to send people off after they visit us to the other businesses in Bailey and to share the business if we can. This being the slowest time of year, this is anybody that lives in Colorado and has a business knows this time of year you just try to survive till the summer comes back, and so we're working on that. But we've been in business since 2013 in our present location. The building that we occupy is, I think, the second oldest building in Bailey. It was built in 1878. So it has a long, varied history. It was always a grocery store from the time it was built until we took it over. And it in no way resembles a grocery store anymore, but it did for a year or two. We tried to run a grocery store. And we realized after about a year that we were the only ones eating the groceries, which isn't a good reason to own a grocery store. So while we were trying the groceries out, I have a long-standing interest in Sasquatch, which I'll talk more about as well in a minute. But we thought we would attempt to do a grocery store and a Sasquatch Outpost. And after a couple of years, we realized the groceries are just not going to work. Everyone does their shopping in Conifer when they're on their way back from Denver. And so we ended up getting rid of the groceries and all the equipment and went 100% with the Bigfoot theme. And we've never looked back. In fact, this is the first year since we've been open that we have done less business than the previous year. And I think everyone's in that boat. It's not just us, it's all the businesses in Bailey. So we are part of the decline this past year for who knows what reasons, but every other year we have grown. Our business has grown, numbers of customers have grown, and to date, we built our museum in 2016. I think since 2016, we've had somewhere in the realm of 90, maybe a bit more, 90,000 visitors come through the museum, which in a little town like Bailey, which is not, we're about 10,000 people. You'd never know it if you drive through Bailey, but we are, because everyone's spread out and has big properties. But, and I don't know if Westcliff is incorporated. We are unincorporated, so we depend on the county for everything. But for a town even of our size, that's a lot of people. So many, many, many repeat visitors, many people who come in, locals who come in, and then anytime anyone is in town, visitors, friends, they bring them, which we appreciate. So let me go forward here and see how my this is going to work. So I've already mentioned the gift shop and the museum. I was born in Oklahoma, but I grew up overseas. My parents were missionaries, and I grew up in the country of Kenya. from the time I was 11 until I graduated from high school. Came back to the U.S. for college, and then ended up going back overseas for 20 years myself, working in the nonprofit world. Um, for much of that time, I was working as a crisis manager for a very large faith-based nonprofit, and in that role, I dealt with kidnappings, murders, terrorist bombings, things. As I look back on it now, it seems like a different life. Seems like I was living someone else's life back then compared to what I'm doing now. Of course, if you had asked me back then, could I imagine doing what I'm doing now? I would have said absolutely not. But here we are. Life has a way of surprising us. And this is an older statistic, but I've been involved in Sasquatch research for about between 12 and 13 years now. And now we did have a podcast up until we have 2 years of podcast, more than that, actually. I took a break from doing the podcast because it takes a great deal of work. And if you're going to do a podcast correctly, and it was called the Sasquatch Outpost podcast. If you go on YouTube, you can see, I think I have 98 episodes on YouTube of the Sasquatch Outpost podcast, and interviewed, scores of people, talked about anything and everything related to Sasquatch. So encourage you to go look at those podcasts if you're interested at all. I will be starting up another podcast after my current project, which, whoops, got my order here messed up. But we started a second company about 3 years ago called Rabbit Hole Adventures. And I use that company whenever I'm taking people out into the woods, whether it be for a night hike. We do camping expeditions. We do horseback expeditions. You can find any of those on the Rabbit Hole website, which is rabbitholeadventures.co, not .com, rabbitholeadventures.co, and you'll see everything listed there and what it costs to do it if you're interested. We've had many, many adventures over the years, and I've literally taken hundreds of people out at night or camping, and have had some phenomenal things happen, and I believe have had many encounters with Sasquatch during that time. This is my current project. We're working on a Sasquatch escape room, or an escape adventure, on the upstairs at our outpost, and it's taking a great deal of time, a great deal of money. I hope when we're done that it will be one of the most high-tech and scariest escape rooms that anyone's ever done. If you've never done an escape room, look them up. They're very popular around the country today. Just to explain very briefly what an escape room is, you can find them on any theme that you want. Ours is obviously a Bigfoot theme. And from the time you enter the space, it's usually more than one room, you have 1 hour to get out by solving puzzles. And if you fail, then you fail. If you succeed, then you get kind of an opportunity to brag that you got through the escape room and survived it. So we're hoping to be open by summertime, maybe late spring. We'll see how things go. But it's taking literally all of my time right now. Every single day I'm working on this. And having never designed one, I'm working with a friend who's helping me put this whole thing together. So I'm figuring out as we go. But that's our big project right now. So a little bit about my own journey when it comes to Sasquatch. Some of you may remember a film that came out in 1972 called The Legend of Boggy Creek. Now, in the 70s, there wasn't a whole lot of information available about Sasquatch. Now, there was a video that came out, I think I mentioned it here, in 1967. It was a video clip of Sasquatch that was filmed by two men, Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson. It was very big news at the time. A lot of news coverage. These two cowboys have been out looking for Sasquatch for a month on horseback. Had a pack horse with them. They found one. It was a female, and they filmed her for I think 54 seconds until she disappeared. They used a wind up 16 millimeter projector, and to till today, I mean, even since 1967 until today, I believe that is the best footage ever filmed of a Sasquatch. I do believe it is real. What you're looking at is a real female Sasquatch that was nicknamed Patty, and has been known as that name forever. But she and people ever since then have tried to prove and disprove this clip as being real. I do believe it is real. I'm 100% convinced of that for many reasons, which I don't have time to go into here. But the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek was the movie that came out in 1972, and that's the poster for it on the screen. The first docudrama about Sasquatch that was ever filmed. Many, many, many more have been filmed since then, but this was filmed in the town of Fouke, Arkansas, Fouke, Fouke, Arkansas. And it was a story of a Sasquatch that would come through Fouke periodically, and they still have many sightings today in Fouke. And it was kind of a low budget movie at the time. Most of the actors were people who lived in Fouke and had had the experiences themselves. They were not Hollywood actors. But a good film. And I remember watching it in 1972. I was 10 years old. Scared me to death. It was rated G, but it scared me. And they never called the creature Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It was just called the Fouke Monster. And but that's what it was. It was a Sasquatch that was roaming the area at that time and was responsible for a lot of pets being killed and some livestock. Never hurt any people, but many, many people saw it. Many people had encounters with it or with them. There could have been more than one. Still is a good movie. If you're interested, you can see it on Amazon Prime, I think, maybe Netflix, but just look up The Legend of Boggy Creek. But that got me going even back in my early years, thinking about something that could be living in the woods that we didn't know about. Now, the first eyewitness I met was in 2012. We were just getting our store renovated. It took us about 9 months, thanks to some complications from the county. And we rebuilt it, basically rebuilt it. And during that time, I found out that a woman, local business owner, manager of the Bailey Lodge at the time, had seen a Sasquatch with her best friend maybe a month prior to when I talked to her. It was in May. It was daylight, evening. Two people, they both saw it. They both agreed on what they saw. So when you have a daytime double person or more sighting of something, the chance of mistaken identity is very, very small. And one person, people always doubt what they've seen or what they said they've seen. But when it's two people and they both agree, unless they just agreed to lie, then they probably saw what they said they saw. And these two women had a Sasquatch run down a hill near them as they were walking up an old forest road. And they both saw it. Very large, hairy, running on 2 feet. And they, I agreed never to tell anyone. And on their way back to where they lived, a car came by and it was some friends. And of course, they told them immediately about what they had just seen. And she took some hits professionally. Some people really mocked her, and so stopped talking about it for a long time. And as an aside, that's the case for most people who have seen a Sasquatch or encountered a Sasquatch, is they don't talk about it because they don't want to have that happen. They don't want to be ridiculed, risk their reputation, risk their job, etc. And so, but she absolutely saw Sasquatch with her friend, and so that really got me going when I met her, and it kind of fulfilled a lifelong question: is does Bigfoot really exist? And when I met her and talked to her, she was so credible, so convincing. I thought, okay, that's it. That's all I needed to hear to know that they do exist. And there's still mystery and magic in the world if Bigfoot exists. But if Bigfoot is real, then who knows what else is possible? I mean, is are fairies real? Are giants? Are ghosts real? I mean, yeah, you open a box when you acknowledge something like Sasquatch being real to all kinds of things that could be real that we don't want to acknowledge. My journey began back in 2012 with what seemed logical to me at the time, and I believed the Sasquatch was real. I believed that they had to be flesh and blood, so they were not, a figment of people's imagination. They had to be, you know, flesh and blood, real creatures. I figured they had to be really skillful at hiding, which is why we didn't see them very often. And since we hadn't caught or killed or tamed any, then I figured there only could be a few of them. There couldn't have been very many. I knew there was more than one, and that's one of the most common questions I get asked by people who come in is they'll go through our museum and they'll come out and they'll say, "Huh, so there's more than one." And my answer to that is, yes. Did you ever take biology in school? Because you have to have more than one of anything to exist. There has to be a minimal breeding population to maintain genetic diversity, et cetera. So, yes, there's more than one Bigfoot. If there's only one, then it's the fastest creature in the world that can get not only around our country, but around the world, because there is a version of Sasquatch on every continent in the world. If I don't know if you knew that, but the most famous is the Yeti in the Himalayas. In China, they call it the Yeren. In Australia, they call it the Yowie. In Russia, they call it the Almas or Almasti. But every continent has a different name for them and knows about them. So we're not unique. This is not a North American phenomenon only. And I figured I better be careful in the woods and make sure I'm never the last one in line when I'm in the woods with other people. And for a long time, I would always maneuver myself to be in the middle because I never wanted to be the last one, because I figured if anyone was going to get snatched by a Sasquatch, I had to be the last person. So my thinking has changed dramatically over the years. But when I first started, that's what I was thinking, and very much fearful, but that has changed. I'm just going to take a quick pause here and open my office door because I'm cold and I have a fire going in the next room. Just a second. I need to let some of that heat get into my office. I'm sitting here freezing to death in my office. So I have Cherokee heritage. My On my father's side, my grandmother and my great grandfather were both on the Cherokee rolls, and which entitles me to membership in the Cherokee Nation, which I attempted to get, but didn't have all the paperwork I needed. But my point being, we have some Native American heritage, and so the Native American beliefs in Sasquatch are one of the most compelling proofs that they exist that I'm aware of. Because the stories about Sasquatch go back to the earliest stories of recorded time that we have. And every single tribe, to my knowledge, believes in Sasquatch, believes that they are real. And all the years I've been in business, we've had thousands of Native Americans come through. And I only remember one who did not believe that Sasquatch was real. And he happened to be a tribal cop. And he was with his wife, who was also Native. And I was quizzing him as to why he didn't believe. And his wife looked at me and she said, I know. He's nuts, isn't he? Because he doesn't believe. And I asked him why. And he said, well, he was the one who would go investigate sightings in his community when people would call. He just wasn't convinced that there was enough evidence. When we first opened our store, I had a cutout of Sasquatch holding a sign that I put on the front of the building. And the sign said, I do not believe the evidence supports the existence of humans. And so got a lot of laughs about that over the years, but Sasquatch would turn the tables on us almost certainly if they could. Each tribe has their own name. So names like Keklekudle, which means hairy savage in Cherokee. Yeitso in Navajo means big god. Estikapkaki in Seminole means tall man. Lakota Sioux Chayetanka means big elder brother. And you'll notice that these are all names you give people, not names you give animals, because every native I've spoken to says that they're not an animal. They're people. They're people that are different from us, but they're people nonetheless. And I have come to agree with them in what Sasquatch is. And so, but they all have their own names. If Sasquatch didn't exist, then it's a lot of hundreds of years of tradition for nothing that they would have made up. And it's across the country. It's not just one tribe, it's every tribe. So you'll have kids now, Native American children who grow up in the city and may not believe, but if you ask their parents and grandparents, I can guarantee that they do. So it's not just an old tradition, but there's even pictographs in caves that apparently depict Sasquatch. The best example is what's known as the hairy man. And this is a depiction of what is found. And I don't know if our images are covering that on my screen anyway. Our images are covering the picture, but it's in Northern California. And what's interesting about these pictures is that they are life size. So the male is actually 8 feet tall in the cave, and the female was 6 feet tall, and the little one was 3 feet tall. So they painted them life size, and they call him hairy man or weeping man because of the symbols on his face. But it's kind of an agreed conclusion that these are depicting Sasquatch. So, as I said, they were created life size in the cave themselves, in itself. So 8.5, 6 feet, and 4 feet. And they talk about them as being people, and they also talk about them as being spiritual beings, as having supernatural abilities, paranormal abilities. I've come to agree with them on those points as well. And so I have learned over the years to lean on the Native American knowledge about Sasquatch as being a very strong foundation for what my own research concluded, and I've come to the same conclusions myself as what my Native American friends would tell me about Sasquatch. So eyewitness accounts, not just by Native Americans, but by anyone, go back even into the 1600s in every state in the U.S. There are sightings in every single state in the U.S. Colorado is one of the higher numbers of sightings, but obviously the Pacific Northwest, and a lot of people mistakenly assume that that's where Sasquatch lives. That's the only place they live, which is not true. They're in every single state. There are huge populations of them in Colorado, in the whole eastern seaboard, in the deep south, and they're called different things. In Florida, they call them the skunk ape. In Ohio, they call it the grass man. So different names based on the part of the country. And Kathy, at the end of this slide, I'm going to pause for a minute for questions.
Okay.
The total number of encounters officially probably would range between 30 and 50,000 eyewitness sightings. Now, I believe that number is extremely conservative. I would put it probably at 10 times that, because in my experience, only 1 in 10 people will tell you a story that they've had. The other 9 are not going to tell you what happened to them unless they feel safe enough to say it. And we have people all the time that come into our shop, want to ask us questions, and they'll look around, make sure nobody's listening, and walk up to the counter and say, "Can I tell you a story?" And now, it used to be a big secret. Nowadays, people tend to just walk up and start talking out loud, and everybody else who happens to be nearby kind of turns to listen or comes over to the counter. And so we have many interesting conversations in front of the counter and I can't tell you how many times I'll have a husband and wife come up. They'll be purchasing something, and the husband will say, almost always the husband will say, "Well, I have a story about a Sasquatch I saw." And he starts to tell the story, and his wife's looking at him like this. And she'll finally say, "You never told me that." He goes, "I know, because I didn't want you to make fun of me." But it may have happened 10 years, 20 years previously, but he definitely had a story, definitely had the details down. He just never told his wife. So witnesses from every walk of life, profession, age, ethnic background. And these are drawings by my podcast co-host, Sibylla Irwin, fantastic artist. And she will sit down and interview eyewitnesses for hours until she can sketch an image and that they agree with her that that is what they saw. So the images you can see there are a composite from an eyewitness who went to great length to explain what he or she saw. And Sibylla does it free of charge. She does it as kind of a therapy for people, because many people who have an encounter experience some type of PTSD afterwards. And this is a way that Sibylla can offer to help these people talk through what happened with a safe person who's not going to mock them, and help them to kind of grasp what happened to them and be able to move beyond it, because many people haven't been able to move beyond it. It's so rocked their world. So I think that's all for that. Yeah. So I'm going to pause for a minute if there's any questions and see if I can answer.
Any questions so far?
Jim,
Yes.
question, with this many, sightings, have there ever been any evidence of like finding bones from the dead?
Great question. And I get that asked very often. The only way I can answer that is that depends. Um, I would have to answer one way based on what we know, and another way based on what I'm pretty sure is true. What we know is no. What I'm pretty sure is absolutely there are bones that exist that have been found. Sasquatch has been killed, whether it be hit by vehicles, shot by hunters, you know, and so I'm convinced they've been killed. I'm convinced that probably somewhere in in the country is a sample, is a body or bones or tissue. It's just that has not been made public. And I'm convinced today the existence of Sasquatch is an even bigger conspiracy of secrecy to the UFO phenomenon. And we've all seen how much now people are talking about UFOs and how much now the government is coming forward with, you know, evidence from fighter pilots, et cetera, that for years they kept under wraps. While the same is true of Sasquatch, it's even a bigger secret that may eventually come out, but I think it has not come out because the government stands to lose bazillions of dollars if people stop going to national parks and hiking in national forests because they're afraid. This is a roundabout answer to your question, but many of you, I'm sure, will remember when the movie Jaws came out, 1980s, and when it came out, that summer, I call it the Jaws effect. The beaches were empty. Beach resorts lost billions of dollars because nobody would go into the water because of a movie about a fictional shark. And it scared people so badly that, you know, private enterprise lost their shirts in many cases. Well, imagine that times 50 if people were told by our government that Sasquatch does exist and that they've been tracking them for decades. People would either be terrified and never go in the woods again, or people would insist that the government set aside preserves for Bigfoot and, you know, everything else that could happen. So, but no bones that we know of publicly, or you would have heard about it as well. And really, well, I'll talk more about the DNA as we go forward. But good question.
I have a question.
We have one more question, Jim.
Okay.
Okay, so, I've gone with my son to do scouting in the forest for elk and deer, and he
Okay.
puts cameras out. So it seems to me that, you know, you can set up cameras in the Forest Service even, and, check those pictures. It seems like there'd be opportunities to see, because we saw all kinds of wildlife that we didn't think
Sure.
were in that part of the forest. So is that
Well,
the way of the future?
it's a great question. It's a great question. And not only have hunters been putting game cameras out, Bigfoot researchers have been putting game cameras out for decades, and without any really concrete evidence coming forward. Now, there's a very simple answer to that. Now, believe me or not, but I'm convinced that Sasquatch knows what a camera is. In fact, they know the difference between a camera and an audio recorder. I can put audio recorders out all night, day or night. They don't care. And they will vocalize around them. They'll walk right up to it. You can hear them sniffing, whatever, roaring, yelling, all those we've recorded. They don't care. When it comes to a camera, they do care, and they will never willingly or knowingly step in front of a game camera. What they will do is they will knock them off the trees. They will grab the camera and turn it around the other side of the tree so they can go where they want to go without being filmed. I have had friends who've found their cameras at the base of the tree smashed into 200 pieces. People wouldn't do that. If a person came across a game camera that had any issue with it, they would probably just take it off the tree and leave. And it's very difficult to secure the cameras in a way that nobody could get it. You try to hide them so that people don't see them, but Sasquatch sees it, and I think it's because their view can within their own view eye system, etc., have the ability to see infrared. I'm convinced that's how they do this. And so they know when there's cameras in their environment because we're going into their environment. And so I've stopped putting cameras out. In fact, when I've done gifting, and I've done a lot of gifting over the years, if I ever put a camera at the site pointed at the area that we're using to gift with them, everything stops immediately. Everything would stop. All activity would stop until I would remove that camera, and then they would start to return again and interact with us. But people who tell me they're afraid, I don't want to go camping, I'm afraid of Bigfoot, I say, okay, do you have a game camera? Yeah. Then go and tie it to a tree and point it right at your tent. And as long as that game camera is functioning, you will have a peaceful night because they're not going to walk in front of that camera. So, but when the camera battery dies, all bets are off. They know when the camera is no longer functioning, and they will go into the area that the camera was filming until the battery died. And I don't know how they know that. I don't know how they know what a camera is, but they do. So, big question. Was there any question in the chat, Kathy?
I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay. Well, I'll move forward, and then I'll pause again in a little bit. So think of your other questions as we go. So now, Teddy Roosevelt wrote a book in the can't remember what year it was, called The Wilderness Hunter. He included in his book a story about a man named Bauman. Now, Bauman, let me see if I put something else here. The Wilderness Hunter, 1893, maybe the first widely distributed tale of a Bigfoot encounter by early American West pioneers. They were actually trappers. I believe it happened in Idaho. Two men were trapping beaver and mink and other fur bearers, and kept, when they would be out all day checking their traps, setting new traps. So when they would come back to their camp, they would find it ransacked, everything just destroyed or tossed around the camp, and they couldn't figure out why somebody would do that. So they would rebuild the camp, and then they would go and then come back, and it would all be scattered again. So they were getting upset now that somebody was messing with them. So they started sleeping with their rifle next to them. And in the story, they decided, so they were asleep in their lean-to one night, open on both ends, and one of them woke up, saw a very large, dark figure standing outside their lean-to, fired his rifle at it, probably hit it. They heard it scream, and then they heard it just destroying everything in its path as it ran off. But it scared these two men, so they decided to leave and pack up the next day, and they had to go pick up all their traps. And neither of them wanted to go alone, so they went together, and they got near the end. They had a couple of traps left, and Bauman said to his partner, why don't you go grab those last two, or no, sorry, why don't you go to camp and start to break camp and get packed up? I'll go grab the last two traps, which he did. Thought that he should be hearing something, the sounds of his friend breaking camp, couldn't hear anything, called, got no response. And when he got to camp, he found his friend dead with a broken neck. And he feels it was almost certainly the Sasquatch that killed him. But there was provocation there. Obviously, the Sasquatch was shot at or shot and hit, and didn't appreciate it. Didn't kill the Sasquatch, but didn't appreciate it. So when Teddy met Bauman, heard his story, believed him, he said, as this man told him his story, he showed every evidence that it was real. He was perspiring. The hair on his arms was standing up. Those kind of autonomic things you can't really fake. You can't fake goose pimples when your hair stands up. I mean, it's a response your body gives to a feeling of fear or uncertainty or whatever, and it's a fight or flight response. Now, Kathy, are the participants blocking the picture and that image for you?
No, we're seeing everything.
Okay, good.
Showing.
So some of the early pioneers of Bigfoot research, John Green was actually a Canadian journalist, did a great deal of research. He first started hearing reports of Sasquatch sightings in 1957. He actually interviewed a man by the name of Albert Ostman, who told him that he had been abducted by a female Sasquatch, I think, in 1924, carried in his sleeping bag for a great distance and then put down in a kind of a cave depression or something where the rest of the family were, and he stayed there a week and never talked about it until 1957 when he realized other people were talking about their encounters. But Albert had kept this to himself since 1924. He managed to escape after a week, and the Sasquatch did not come after him. So John Green authored several books on Sasquatch, and he compiled a personal database of over 3,000 sightings and track reports. So just one guy had over 3,000 reports. At some point, when the numbers start to mount into the low thousands and then tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, you have to come to the place where you say, okay, I don't believe, but all of these people can't be mistaken. These can't all be mistaken identity. And everyone has seen a bear, and all these people think they saw a Sasquatch. Most people know what a bear looks like. And so we don't know what a Sasquatch looks like, well, unless you've had an encounter, but thousands and thousands and thousands of sightings. And John had a 3,000 person database himself. Grover Krantz was a professor of anthropology and primatology at Washington State. He was the first serious scientist to study Sasquatch, and his career was marked by the fact that as an academic, he was willing to come forward, risk his job, risk his reputation to talk about what he believed was true. Now, he never saw Sasquatch all the years that he was doing this, but he was doing research. He published 5 books on the topic. He was ridiculed. He was the butt of many jokes within his professional career, but eventually he won some people over. And he donated his body and his dog's body to the Smithsonian, where you can find them in this position of his wolfhound jumping up on him. I don't know if the skeletons are always displayed, but he donated his body, and that's what they did with his body, was create 2 skeletons. And then a third was John Bender-Nago, who only passed away in 2018. Canadian-born wildlife biologist. He believed that Bigfoot should be given more serious attention, but that the evidence doesn't get scrutinized because people won't even go down that road. He published 2 books, North America's Great Ape, and a I can't read that writing, my own writing with the, but he again was an academic, trained scientist, was risked a lot, and I have great respect for these men who were willing to risk ridicule and their careers in order to talk about what they believed was true about Sasquatch. Bendernagle, I believe, was an eyewitness himself. So here's some theories about Sasquatch. What are they, or what could they be? One theory is that they're a great ape, or they're a descendant of a great ape, an extinct great ape by the name of Gigantopithecus. Some believe that they're an alien species planted here thousands of years ago. Some believe they're the descendant of what's called the Nephilim in the Bible, or something else, a hybrid, a human hybrid of some kind, or who knows. So if Sasquatch were a great ape, I think we should expect them to look and act and think like a great ape. And so the question is, what does the evidence show? Do they behave like a great ape? If they are a great ape, then they live on our doorstep. And let me move to the next slide. They live on our doorstep. We've gone to the deepest parts of Central Africa to capture gorillas and chimpanzees. We've gone to Southeast Asia and captured orangutans. They've been in captivity for probably 100 years. And we don't have to go anywhere. Right on our doorstep in the forests in our states lives Sasquatch, and yet we could never catch them, have never killed them. And if they were simply an undiscovered great ape, they would have been in zoos for decades by now. So the conundrum is, the confusing thing is, we have stories going back hundreds of years of encounters, 30 to 50 conservatively eyewitness sightings in the U.S. alone, agreement by every Native American tribe that they exist, thousands of plaster casts of footprints, thousands of recordings of their language and their vocalizations, some photographic evidence that people have captured. And yet, with all of that, we have no body, no bones, and no live or dead specimens. So if your goal in life is to find the body or find the smoking gun, good luck. That's all I can say, because researchers have been trying for 50 years to no avail. And we've been trying with the best technology available to us. And I'm almost convinced that our technology is shooting us in the foot, because our technology gives us away to the Sasquatch. But another quick pause here for questions, and then I'll try to wrap it up here.
Jim, we have two questions we have a question in the
Okay.
chat feature here. Has there ever been a report of a Sasquatch actually hurting a person unprovoked?
That's a great way to ask that question, because provoked, yes, there have been stories of people being hurt. One case in point was a story I heard about a man who worked, I think they were building either Aspen or Vale, and they had teams of loggers in the woods for weeks on end, just logging to come up with the wood to build these ski stations. So these guys were out there for a long time, and they kept having their stores, food stores, stolen by something. One day they managed to capture, I don't remember how, a young juvenile Sasquatch. It took 5 of these lumberjacks to control it, to keep it. It was so strong. And they threw it in an unused, hard-sided shed and piled some great big logs against the door that it couldn't dislodge. And so it screamed all that day. The next day, the foreman was gone from the camp. So the the lumberjacks wanted to wait till the foreman got back. They knew what they had. They knew what they had captured, but they didn't know what to do with it. So the foreman was still away, and the second night after they captured it, and it's been screaming the whole time. At 10 p.m., the guy who was on watch at that point said, in his words, the big ape came around the corner of the shed, slapped the logs out of the way like they were nothing, grabbed this guy, I guess by his forearm, and flung him into the building and knocked him out. And in the process, tore his arm off at the elbow. And the story, as was told by another person who heard him telling this story, said that he was missing his arm, obviously from the elbow down. The doctor in the camp saved him from bleeding out, but that was a provoked attack. Now, unprovoked, let me answer this way. I take scores of people into the woods every summer for nights on end, 3-4 nights. If I honestly believed there was even a small chance that Sasquatch was going to kill or maim or attack any of those people, I couldn't do this. Obviously, I can't afford the liability of being sued because someone gets attacked by a Sasquatch and blames me for it because I'm the one taking them out. Now, I bear responsibility for that. I do carry liability insurance. Now, when the day comes that I have to submit a claim by somebody being attacked by a Sasquatch, we'll see what happens. But hopefully that day will never come. But I'm very comfortable taking people out because I'm very comfortable with how Sasquatch relates to us. And I believe they don't have any intention of killing us or hurting us. And if we've provoked them by shooting at them or something else, we should expect perhaps to have a different response. But unprovoked, no, I don't know of any attacks. And I know researchers across the country who, combined with my research, we've taken thousands of people into the wilderness around the country. And to date, I've never heard of anyone being hurt from anybody, any of the researchers, or being killed. And so, no, that's a long answer, but I would say no, they do not attack us unprovoked. If they did, I could not do what I'm doing. Honestly, I couldn't do it.
Okay,
Did you
I think when the person, they put in the second line of unprovoked, so I think it showed up as two
Okay.
messages from what I can see.
Okay. So those are the only two that you had for now.
Any questions here in the group? No questions from the in-person folks right now.
Okay, got it. So let me see what slide. I can't see what slide I'm on currently. Can you see that at your end?
Yep.
What number am I on?
Can you put that back with the person, the 4 to 6 feet tall?
Yeah.
And then maybe I can tell you. It's not showing me what slide number that is.
Okay. I thought there was a way to see that, but there may not be. And I know we're getting close to our hour limit here. So what would you like me to do at this point, Kathy?
Folks, are you okay with us continuing? If anyone needs to leave, we'll just suggest that they leave.
Okay.
Does that seem fair? Okay.
I think in the next 15 minutes I can wrap this up. So when I compare what we know today with humans being on average 4 to 6, maybe 6.5 feet tall, 150 to 300 pounds on average, versus a full-grown male mountain gorilla, which would stand 4 to 6 feet tall, weigh up to 450 pounds, and is widely acknowledged as being 6 to 15 times as strong as a human. So they can do things that we could never do just because of their muscle mass and how large they are. So, so that's what we know. Now, what we don't know is a full-grown male Sasquatch would stand anywhere from 7 to 9 feet tall, weigh 500 to probably over 1,000 pounds, and their strength is legendary. I mean, things they can do with trees defy our imagination. It would take us a long time with heavy equipment to be able to do what they do with their bare hands. Now, I talked about the great apes that are in captivity. So let's see, approximately 1,000 chimpanzees, 4,000 gorillas, 900 orangutans. So approximately 6,000 great apes today captive somewhere in the world in zoos. And as I said earlier, if Sasquatch were just a great ape, they would be a statistic in here. X number of Sasquatch captured and displayed in zoos. And it just has not happened. I'm going to skip this part because we already talked about this. Gigantopithecus. So there's no fossil record, and they just kind of appear based on the DNA that's been studied. They just kind of appeared on the scene 20,000 years ago or something, which in the age of the earth taken into comparison, 20,000 years is yesterday. Native Americans believe they're people. They also believe that they're spiritual. They can move in and out of our reality of what we can see and hear and experience. They believe that they are shaman. They have the ability to heal us. And I know of multiple people who would say they were healed by Sasquatch, in some cases of a terminal illness. Speaking thoughts into our heads that did not originate with us, or attacking people through infrasound. We call it zapping or sizzling, and to be honest, we don't know how they do it. But if you're with a group of people, and I've seen this happen, it's never happened to me, where a group of people will be out hiking, and for some reason, one person in the group suddenly feels overwhelmed with terror, or and they'll start saying, "We need to leave. We need to leave here right now." And everyone else in the group looks at them like, "What are you talking about? What's going on?" But one person would have been targeted as an attack using whatever they used, infrasound, to, if they can get one person to leave, maybe they can get everyone to leave. So it's basically a non-physical confrontational way to get people to leave when you want them to leave an area. And okay, we've already done that. So there was a DNA study done in 2013, widely criticized, called the Sasquatch Genome Project. It was about a $500,000 study, and over 100 samples, I think 111 samples of blood, hair, saliva, and some tissue, I believe, was submitted. It was a blind test, so these samples were submitted to, I think, 11 research laboratories, university laboratories, or forensic laboratories. They weren't told what they were analyzing. They did their analysis. It's very expensive. If you're going to do a correct analysis of Sasquatch blood, tissue, whatever, it's going to cost in excess of $5,000 per sample. So it's not done very often because of the cost involved. The results came back that the mitochondrial DNA, which shows the female side of the lineage, was human. The male DNA, which you can find in the nuclear cells and is the more expensive test, showed that the origin was unknown. So partially showing human female, partially showing an unknown. Unknown meaning there was no evidence in the genome database, and the genome database has DNA evidence from every known species if we've been able to collect it. But every species that we've been able to take DNA from, it's billions of samples. It was nowhere. It didn't show up anywhere in there. In other words, it's possible the Sasquatch is a human hybrid of some kind. If you'll watch my podcast, Sasquatch Outpost podcast from May 30th last year, I interviewed several people involved in that study, and we talked at length about the study and how the samples were acquired and how they came to the conclusions that they did. So I encourage you to look up the May 30th episode. And I'll end with this. Does their behavior resemble a great ape? If they're an ape, they should behave like one. I decided early on that I was going to pursue my knowledge about Sasquatch based on my own research, regardless of where the data was going to take me. Now, I could have just read books. There's people, many people I know who call themselves Bigfoot researchers who never set foot in the woods, but have read copious books and magazines and etc. I decided for me that I was not going to read everyone else's description. I wanted to go out, do my own research, see where the evidence took me, and follow it, which is what I did. So, just a second, let me go back here. So my own research led me to conclude, in conclusion for this time, that Sasquatch is not an animal any more than we are. Now, you could say humans are animals in one respect, and we are primates. Sasquatch would be the same. They walk on two legs like we do. They live in family groups like we do, with a dominant male and female and many offspring. They have their own language like we do. That's a real, legitimate language that's been studied by the appropriate linguists who understand unknown languages. They, but they also have many things that we do not have, meaning the ability to speak into people's minds, the ability to move in and out of our dimension, or at least our view. And I have multiple stories, including one of my own, where Sasquatch just literally disappeared. No indication of where they went, no indication of how they did that, but they seem to have this ability to appear and disappear whenever they want to, wherever they want to. So, this to me, my conclusion is Sasquatch is a type of person, that they are fully or partially human, and that if we study them long enough and close enough, we will find, I think, more than sufficient evidence for that fact that Sasquatch is not an ape, that the physical evidence that we find, footprints, vocalizations, tree knocking, etc., only confirms the things that we don't understand, which is the disappearances, appearances, footsteps walking in the snow and suddenly just stopping in the middle of an open area. The footprints just end, like it evaporated or was taken up or something, or the footprints start in the middle of an open area and carry on from there. So, so those are my conclusions about what Sasquatch is. And so I'll pause and see what questions we have.
We have a
before we end.
question in the chat feature, Jim.
Yeah.
What is your opinion of the theory that Sasquatch exists in another dimension?
I believe that's true. I believe that their normal state of existing is probably invisible to us. So either their vibration, their ability to change their vibration of their cells to kind of disappear in front of what our eyes can see. And let's face it, what our eyes see is light coming into our eyes and being interpreted by our brain a certain way, which is why some people see color one way and other people see the same color a different way. And uh, they both call it the same thing, but in reality, what one person is calling yellow and what the other person is calling yellow is not the same color. So we have this interpretation that's constantly happening within our brains. I believe they disappear and appear, and when they do that, they're going into another dimension. I have lots of evidence I think that would lend itself to that theory, but it's a theory. I can't prove to you concretely that that's what happens when they leave our visual spectrum, and but wherever they go, I haven't figured it out. I don't know if anyone else has, but the fact that they disappear to me is incontrovertible. That there's more than enough evidence to prove that that happens, and that they therefore some of the time live outside of what we can see and hear are these dimensions.
I have a question, Jim. You know how you mentioned earlier that the military, we have reported sightings of UFOs by fighter pilots, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Have there been any reports by the military of Sasquatch? I think of when they do their training exercises and so forth.
Yes, there are several military bases where it's a very common phenomenon to have Sasquatch coming on the base and even trying to get into facilities on the base. And they don't call them Sasquatch, but they'll tell their trainees who are on watch or whatever, now you're going to see things that come in the night. Don't bother them. Don't necessarily report it. We know they're there. We don't believe they mean any harm to what we're trying to do. So, and there, I have in my museum a poster that shows a document that a friend of my daughter, his daughter, was an intern at one of the National Forest offices in Oregon. She came across this questionnaire that said it was like their wildland fire team Bigfoot sighting report. And they had a place on there for their name, email address, etc. And it said at the top of the page, don't bother submitting joke reports or fake reports. They will not be entered in the database. I believe this is a legit document that shows that our government is tracking and has been tracking Sasquatch for a long time. It's just literally such a closely guarded secret that I don't think even everybody in the Forest Service knows that we're doing this, but we are. They are tracking them. So, so yeah, I think the military knows about their existence. So do other branches of the organization of the U.S. government and Forest Service, et cetera. I think they know, and they have known for a long time.
Here's another question in the chat. So wouldn't their being in another dimension explain why there is so little evidence of their existence?
Well, I believe there is abundant evidence of their existence. I believe 50,000 plus eyewitness sightings is very strong evidence. Thousands of plaster casts of their footprints is very compelling evidence. Audio recordings of their language, their screams, them knocking on wood is very compelling evidence. The only evidence we don't have is being able to take people into a room and say, look, on that table, that's a Sasquatch. That we cannot do. But there is abundant evidence outside of that that I think is compelling enough that if people are seriously willing to consider it, as I think we should, the evidence supports the verdict. The verdict being that Sasquatch is real and that they are trying to show themselves to us in different ways. And I think the sightings are increasing over the past, I'd say, 5 years. The number of sightings has grown significantly. And I think it's because they are choosing that it's time for them to show themselves to us. That's my theory.
Any questions here? We have a question here from the room. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So one of the items you listed was that Sasquatch came from aliens. Can you give us some more background on where that came from, where that idea or assumption came from?
It's been out there for a long time, and the association between Sasquatch and UFOs, or Sasquatch and phenomena like orbs, other things like that, are plethora. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who would say, I saw a spacecraft or a UFO, and then I saw a Sasquatch, or I had a Sasquatch encounter, and then I see a craft. And so the story evidence goes back forever. And I think the larger organizations, other non-government organizations such as MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and others, even within their leadership, I think that there's kind of agreement that Sasquatch exists, and because of evidence they have found. And so I think that's my conclusion. But I think many researchers would probably agree with me on this point. Not all, but many would agree. And I know scores of researchers. I don't know how many hundreds of us there are across the country, but there's hundreds.
Any other questions here?
When's your museum open?
We are open currently 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So when we get the escape room open and functional, it would be open at the same hours, 10 to 4.
So people will have a Sasquatch experience in the escape room?
Possibly. I'm not going to give it away. But if it's a Sasquatch themed escape room, I guarantee Sasquatch figures into it. So, but I think you'll find it very entertaining. For some people, probably quite scary. And we're going to definitely have an age limit. This will not be a G-rated escape room. This is going to be something above that. So,
Okay.
One last comment, question. So some people seem to have a more sensory perception. I mean, picking up auras, you've heard of that, and or other vibes that come off. Has anybody ever tried to connect individual human ability for what you might call extrasensory perception with your theory about their messaging?
yes. And I do believe there are people, and I don't know why these people have these abilities. There are people who are far more in tune with the Sasquatch vibration, who can tell me as we go out in the woods, I think there's one over there. I think there's one over there. Now, I can't prove that they're correct, but I've had them be right so many times that I don't doubt them anymore. And so I think the ability for some people to discern their presence is irrefutable in my mind. I'm not one of those people. I like hanging around with those people because I learn something from them. But I can't speak really to the alien connection with all of what I just mentioned, but um, it would not surprise me if when the day comes that we close um, uh, our store or our museum or whatever, that uh, people probably will come forward who didn't come forward when we were open to say, yeah, these are things that I knew about or um, didn't want to say anything, or people that currently come into my museum and store. And uh, I just had a call yesterday, a very long call with a guy who had some experiences that were pretty far out beyond my experiences. But very rational guy, very credible guy in every other way. And so I have to take seriously his beliefs about how this whole extrasensory side of things is real. And he didn't link it to UFOs or anything of that nature, but he had so much experience that um, I either have to discredit him entirely as a person, which I can't, or I have to believe what he's telling me is at least partially, if not completely true.
Jim, to lighten it up a little bit. Have you ever thought about getting the NFL involved? They throw a lot of money at you to find the Sasquatch.
Who? Oh, NFL? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine a Sasquatch middle linebacker?
The Denver Broncos.
Denver Broncos. Yes.
And last thing I want to say is I want to be here today to meet you. Thank you. You just
Sure.
started carrying the South Park sarsaparilla, which has the Sasquatch on the label.
Yes. Yes, we do carry it.
Thank
And
you.
I probably need to get restocked actually. So,
That's my son's business, and so
oh, it is. Okay. Well, we're happy to. And, um, you know, we get contacted by vendors all the time carrying anything and everything you can imagine. So I knew that Rocky Mountain Sodas had a Sasquatch on one of their labels. I asked him, how about you do me different flavors and put Sasquatch on all of them? He said, nah, can't do that. But
all about the money.
yeah, but I like their sarsaparilla. I like the flavor of it. But
I'll stop by the next time through, and
yeah, absolutely, please do.
yes, look forward to it.
All right, this sounds like a good place to end, Jim. I want to say
Okay.
thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
We appreciate the discussion so much.
You're welcome. Thank you
You
for
have a
tuning in.
Have a great rest of your day, and
I appreciate
this will
that.
be posted on our YouTube website probably in a couple of days or so.
Great.
All right, you take
Thank
care. Have a
you.
wonderful
Okay.
day. Thanks so much.
You too. Bye-bye.
Travels home.